2020 election was determined by mail-in ballots. But the censorship of mail-in ballots is really one of the most extraordinary stories in our American history. What happened was you had this plot within the Department of Homeland Security. You had this group within the Atlantic Council and the foreign policy establishment, which began arguing in 2017 for the need for a permanent domestic censorship government office to serve as a quarterback for what they called a whole-of-society counter-misinformation, counter-disinformation alliance. That just means censorship. Their whole-of-society model explicitly proposed that we need every single asset within society to be mobilized in a whole-of-society effort to stop misinformation online. It was that much of an existential threat to democracy. But they fixated in 2017 that it had to be centered within the government because only the government would have the clout and the coercive threat powers and the perceived authority to be able to tell the social media companies what to do, to be able to summon a government-funded NGO swarm to create that media surround sound, to be able to arm an astroturfed army of fact-checkers, and to be able to liaise and connect all these different censorship industry actors into a cohesive, unified whole. And the Atlantic Council initially proposed, with this blueprint called Forward Defense, they initially proposed that running this out of the State Department's Global Engagement Center because they had so many assets there who were so effective at censorship under Rick Stengel's steed under the Obama administration. But they said, we're not going to be able to get away with that because we don't really have a national security predicate and it's supposed to be foreign-facing. We can't really use that hook unless we have a sort of national security one. Then they contemplated parking it at the CIA. And they said, well, actually, there's two reasons we can't do that. CIA is foreign-facing. We can't really establish a counterintelligence threat to bring it home domestically. So they said, okay, well, what about the FBI? They said, well, the FBI would be great. It's domestic. But the problem is the FBI is supposed to be the intelligence arm of the Justice Department. What we're dealing with here are not acts of law-breaking. It's basically support for Trump. If left-wing populists had risen to power like Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn, I have no doubt they would have done the same thing to him there. They targeted Jeremy Corbyn and other left-wing populist NATO-skeptical groups in Europe. But in the U.S., it was all Trump. And so essentially what they said is, well, the only other domestic intelligence equity we have in the U.S. besides the FBI is the DHS. So we are going to essentially take the CIA's power to rig and bribe foreign media organizations, which is a power they've had since the day they were born in 1947, and we're going to combine that with the domestic jurisdiction of the FBI by putting it at DHS. So DHS was basically deputized, it was empowered through this obscure little cybersecurity agency to have the combined powers that the CIA has abroad with the jurisdiction of the FBI at home. And the way they did this was they did a funny little series of switcheroos. So this little thing called CISA, they didn't call it the Disinformation Governance Board, they didn't call it the Censorship Agency, they gave it an obscure little name that no one would notice called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. But it was created by act of Congress in 2018 because of the perceived threat that Russia had hacked the 2016 election. And so we need the cybersecurity power to be able to deal with that. And essentially on the heels of a CIA memo on January 6, 2017, and a same-day DHS executive order on January 6, 2017, arguing that Russia had interfered in the 2016 election, and a DHS mandate saying that elections are now critical infrastructure, you had this new power within DHS to say that cybersecurity attacks on elections are now our purview. And then they did two cute things. One, they said dis, and malinformation online are a form of cybersecurity attack. They are a cyber attack because they are happening online. And they said, we're actually protecting democracy and elections. We don't need a Russian predicate after Russiagate died. So just like that, you had this cybersecurity agency be able to legally make the argument that your tweets about mail-in ballots, if you undermine public faith and confidence in them as a legitimate form of voting, you are now conducting a cyber attack on U.S. critical infrastructure by articulating misinformation on Twitter.
Complaining about election fraud is the same as taking down our power grid.
Yes, you could literally be on your toilet seat and tweet, I think that mail-in ballots are illegitimate. And you were essentially then caught up in the crosshairs of the Department of Homeland Security classifying you as conducting a cyber attack on U.S. critical infrastructure because you were doing misinformation online in the cyber realm, and misinformation is a cyber attack on democracy when it undermines public faith and confidence in our democratic elections and our democratic institutions.